Hi, my name is Paige Gabriel, and this is my leadership interview presentation. The healthcare professional that I interviewed for this assignment is Dr. Karen Honeycutt. She is a department chair, a researcher, a professor, and a program director in the microbiology department at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. So during our interview, the leadership style that came to light most and aligned with Dr. Honeycutt's experience is the path goal theory. So I determined this because her involvement in so many different leadership roles, she has to tailor her approach to the task and the environment at hand. For example, in a research setting, she's usually working with senior level students versus as a professor, she's guiding these students or collaborating with other professors who are at the same qualification level as she is. So she is tailoring her leadership style to what that group of people needs most from her. And the main type of leadership in that path goal theory that I determined and identified was a participative theory in the path goal theory. So I talked to Dr. Honeycutt about evolving as a leader, and her advice for evolving your leadership is being able to take constructive criticism as well as recognizing faults in your leadership. One good way to do this is to take the Myers-Briggs type indicator test, and you can see kind of where you thrive in leadership and where you might have some shortcomings and how you can mend those shortcomings and become a better leader. Another suggestion she had was recognizing positive traits that you responded to well when somebody else was leading you. So when other leaders had positions and were leading you in a sense, and her example that she used for professors in their leadership, what were things that you respond well to and how can you communicate that into your leadership skill? And lastly, she recommended continuing your learning and studying in the field where you're a leader so you can grow with the field rather than being a set leader for this point in time. For example, in the medical field, medicine is constantly changing. Technology is constantly adding and changing the way medicine is seen and given and prescribed. I mean, in the pandemic alone, we've seen a huge increase in telehealth, and being able to educate yourself and recognize the evolving world of the role in which you are a leader helps you grow as a leader and make sure you stay as helpful to those you're leading as possible. So I also talked to her about the difference between leading and managing, and Dr. Honeycutt outlined the main difference between leadership and management as the responsibility that the leader takes on. So often in management, she has witnessed that the leader would direct rather than participate, give directions, tell people what they expect rather than show people what they expect to help them achieve those goals. And Dr. Honeycutt expressed that the key to being a good leader is seeing yourself as part of the team rather than the person that solely gives instruction or as just the team captain. Leaders are still part of the team. If anything, they're the main portion that responsibilities are going to fall back onto. So being able to delegate the material, understand how to work with everybody on the team, and just foster a positive environment is what Dr. Honeycutt suggested would make a better leader and make sure you are leading rather than managing. So some of the surprising information that I took away from this interview was the amount of credit and skill Dr. Honeycutt was attributing to her students and helping her become a stronger leader. Throughout the interview, Dr. Honeycutt would kind of go back to her students and how her students would help her grow in her leadership style, how her students would help her fine-tune her skills and help her determine where she felt she needed to work more on. And she also found that she could see students and try to exhibit some of their skills that she found was positive in their lives. Another thing that surprised me was the amount of collaboration that Dr. Honeycutt expressed between her multiple different roles and the types of creative collaborations Dr. Honeycutt facilitates. For example, taking the research and students working in her research lab and bringing them over and helping with lectures and helping with other professors in her department based on the information they're finding. And she saw this as a way to advance their education in a unique way, while still keeping them responsible for their portion, the research. So I think the creative ideas and collaboration she had to come up with were actually really surprising. You would think everything is a little more cut and dry, and researchers have this role, and professors have this role, and department chairs have this role, but being able to combine those roles makes her life a little bit easier and makes it better for everybody involved as well. And the last surprising fact I have on my PowerPoint was how much Dr. Honeycutt has gained about leadership in her continued formal education. So Dr. Honeycutt has been continually studying, getting more degrees, certifications, and just continuing her education throughout her career. And she attributes a lot of her growth and a lot of her ability to be positive and have a positive impact in multiple different roles is due to her education and being able to continue that role, because she still has a hand in being a student as well as teaching students. And so being and leading has helped her kind of gain this new perspective, a unique perspective, so that she doesn't ever take the students' roles for granted, for example. My key takeaways from this interview were the importance of using your experiences in school to foster and grow your leadership style. So Dr. Honeycutt talked a lot about making sure that we don't take our education for granted, that we take, especially this class, learning about leadership and the importance of leadership and how to be a good leader, taking everything and applying it to our lives rather than taking the notes, taking the quizzes, and going and moving on, making sure we're really fine-tuning our leadership skills, taking everything seriously, and appreciating the education where we are focusing on leadership, because that's something that a lot of places don't do, and then you're in your professional career, and being a leader can be hard to do if you don't have time to sit down and think about what you do best and what you need to work on, etc. So another key takeaway was finding a good balance between empathy and expectations as a leader. So this came up when we were discussing her multiple different roles, and for specifically her role as a professor, being able to show empathy and have empathy for her students, understanding their situations, being flexible if circumstances were to arise, however, and like having that ability without letting her expectations of her students as a leader to them fall. And I think was a really interesting takeaway, and probably my biggest lesson that I learned from this interview overall was finding that balance, and I think that's something I will have to work on personally as well. And another key takeaway that I have is collaboration is a key in being an effective leader, and she talked about this a lot when she was talking about going to different departments and kind of creating those creative collaborations between her different leadership roles. And she expressed that it made her a better leader, it made her better at her job, it made her appreciate her job more when she was able to work with other people and keep ideas going. So that was a really interesting thing as well. So the connections to class that I made was knowing your strengths as a leader ties to the Myers-Briggs type indicator exam that we discussed in class and wrote our reaction paper on. And then Dr. Honeycutt's emphasis on the importance of collaboration ties to the importance of teams, that the presentation from week 3 of class, that's what was coming to mind when we were talking about collaboration a lot. And I definitely can see how our lessons in I'm so sorry for my cat. I could see how our lessons and everything we discuss in class translates over to her leadership roles and her professional career. And then the interview questions that I asked her, I asked, what do you do to continue growing and developing as a leader? What advice would you give to others about how they could best prepare for taking on leadership roles? What was the most surprising thing you learned from your leadership roles? What personal qualities or experiences have contributed most to your effectiveness as a leader? How would you describe an ideal leader in your field, and how do you define leadership versus management? Overall, I think I learned a lot from this interview. I was definitely nervous going into it, but I really appreciated her input, and I think all of her different leadership roles gave a really unique perspective overall. Thanks.